All right, once again, just a reminder, we're running 30 minutes behind today. Thank you for everyone, the speakers and attendees alike, for your patience. If you want to take a look at the agenda, you should see the link in the chat channel for the public. There's also some Q&A happening. If you guys have any thoughts or questions, speakers, just be mindful that people are asking questions during the conversation. So maybe just take a look at the chat, and maybe if you can address some of those during, that would be great. So the next panel, we're going to get into it really quickly. This is moderated by David Gokhshtein, joined by Dr. Tiffany Gray, Dr. Phillip Watts, Samson Williams, Allan Stevo, and Sultan. And we're talking about, the fear part of this. This is the fear track with COVID-19, the real story, with live Q&A. So this one specifically, live Q&A. If anybody has questions for these incredible ladies and gentlemen, please submit your questions on the Q&A section, and they'll do their best to get to them. With that said, I'm going to pass it over to David Gokhshtein and team, and we'll get this underway.
Jeremy, real quick, just heads up, I asked Alex to stay on for this one as well.
Sounds great.
Thanks.
I believe we hear you. Allan, can you hear us?
Hi, this is Allan.
All right, Allan. Yeah, we can hear you. I know you can't do the video. So for Oz and Dr. Tiffany Gray, if you guys can just enable your video if possible as well. And then we can get going as soon as David joins us. Okay, Christina, can you join back in? I saw your face there for a second.
Yeah, I don't quite know what the main problem is with this thing, but I assume it's just that they have capacity somehow.
Well, it was working. In there.
Yeah, the end was working okay. I mean, but Miko never made it on, by the way. He was supposed to be in the last one. And, well, I never understood why they had 6 people up.
Oh, Christian still.
Okay, there you are, Oz. So Christina, David is running a little bit behind because of technical issues. So I'm going to let you just run this, and we're going to do live Q&A. Take a look at the chat and Q&A from people about COVID-19 and all the things happening right now.
We got a lot to unpack then. Okay, well, I'm actually going to start this off with looking at the Q&A and getting coordinated. But if Dr. Tiffany Gray can do a quick introduction so that we all know why she's such a subject matter expert, especially right now with the COVID situation, that would be really helpful. I think I just lost her. Oz, you and I talk about this. Well, you and I, the entire Genius Network talks about this on our Genius Wednesdays. Would you like to give for the baseline of, the COVID Q&A? Let's just give a baseline of what our world looks like now as opposed to 2 months ago.
Sure. As I think you're well aware, the COVID scenario emerged in Wuhan, China, initially called the Wuhan virus, now called about 19 different things. And matriculated into sort of a global pandemic inside of early January. But we didn't start to have major mass effects inside of the United States until late February, early March, at which point in time we started to experience sequential shutdowns and quarantines, largely starting in states that were like mine, New York, that were affected, and then moving across the United States. As of today, there's still a couple of states that don't have quarantines in place. Those are actually in the Midwest. But the concern is that the influx of potentially infected and infected people had come from China, Italy, and the United Kingdom primarily, with the numbers over 1 million in total. So you're looking at cluster type scenarios. You're also looking at the challenges of how you tackle this. The protocols that were put in place for smallpox are what's being looked at in many other countries, from Europe into Africa into Australasia. In the United States, we're moving to full quarantines. We've got the state of Rhode Island hunting down New Yorkers right now. So it's become kind of a challenging situation. And then from the financial perspective of this, we currently have, well, last week there were 16 million jobless claims. We have an additional 4 to 6 million jobless claims this week. We've got the first 50 million of stimulus checks going out today, and we're looking at multiple series of intervention in multiple markets. The president just had a press conference about an hour ago and had talked about an additional $16 billion being allocated for farmers. And the biggest concern that I have, and I think everyone's talking about, which is one of the reasons that we're looking at deploying a healthcare blockchain called RD, is that the supply chain scenario across the country, regardless of what product you're looking at, is going to become very, very difficult inside of the coming months. And accessibility and mass hoarding is also going to become a problem. If you go to any Whole Foods, any Trader Joe's, any large market store right now, any Erewhon, they're all empty. But if you go to your fine fairs, your Gristedes, your local supermarkets, they're reasonably stocked. So it's a challenging situation all around. But the bigger concerns, I think, from the American populace are largely to where is the future job stability, where is the future security, and what is going to happen financially to them inside of the next 90 days.
Agreed. So I did ask Alex to rejoin, but Alex, really quick, like Tiffany, Dr. Gray to kind of give just kind of the overview of what we've been talking about for the last few weeks about how bad it is on the front lines, how many of these hospital workers have no PPE, and just how scary this is. Sorry, Dr. Gray, that was to you.
Can you hear me? I'm sorry, I'm having connectivity issues.
Yeah, we can hear you.
So, hi everyone. I'm glad to join. So I'm Dr. Tiffany Gray. I'm a public health advisor with the DC Department of Health and also a consultant. So in regards to coronavirus, sort of as many of you know, especially in the States, we have been in a couple weeks now of social distancing. And in regards to the health system and health capacity, we are suffering as we're having a really difficult time. We are pulling in healthcare workers, physicians, retired, every which way that we can, tapping into our medical students and other resources to get in the capacity that we need. So not only are we worried about having enough PPE, which we are running out, and many businesses are working to convert their resources to be able to help to provide the necessary resources to our health system. And we are just kind of getting into the height of this thing. We are approaching that curve, as many of you know, over the next couple of days is a really crucial time. But even as other states in some places haven't even reached their necessary peak or haven't even gotten to the tops of their curves yet either. So even if we start thinking about returning back to normal, whether that be, it won't be any time really until June or summer. One of the other issues and challenges is that we just really don't know the behavior of this virus. So we aren't sure if it's something like influenza where we see the drop off in seasons, where in summer it kind of lags off and then we pick back up in the fall. This thing very much so may continue for a long time. And even as we start to enter back into some sort of normalcy, what we consider normal, or re-entry into work or re-entry back into society, we are still having the concern of a potential additional spike in cases, because as we know with this virus, many people are asymptomatic, and as though we don't have enough testing or you don't know your status, those asymptomatic individuals re-enter, putting the most vulnerable and everyone back at risk again. So we just have to brace ourselves for a really long time, and doing the best that we can. But we are entering a very crucial time, and I know the concerns are, of course, the economy, but it's many different layers to this issue. There's lots of talk about health disparities and underlying pre-existing conditions and chronic diseases that were present are now being exacerbated, as we see with the presence of this virus. So we are in it for the long haul for a while.
Yep, agreed. The data supports that. Yep. Hey, David, thanks for joining. I was just kind of co-chairing. I can jump off, or I can get started out.
I'm scared that my network is going to go off.
Okay, all right, I'll hang tight. Alex, would you like to kind of give your thoughts around just this COVID pandemic and everything that it's affecting in society? I mean, I know you have a lot to say.
Sure. Well, I guess I'll summarize. Can you hear me, by the way?
Yes.
Great. So I think that it's worse than is talked about, because everybody needs a theory when they're dealing with something that has to do with science. And we also should be saying, within science fiction, which disaster scenario is this most like? And so for me, the biggest disaster is that it shows how unintelligent people are to buy this BS story that it was a bat that somebody ate and maybe it went to a pangolin. Have you ever seen a bat fuck a pangolin? No. So there's no connection between bats and pangolins. All these stories are nonsense. And where you can see what really was happening was that this is made in a lab. It was a US-China joint venture. Zheng Lishi I think she's the inventor of the original SARS and MERS and SARS-CoV-2. And she did so well that she was brought over to the University of North Carolina. She was given a National Institute of Health grant. She was given a grant from USAID, and basically her work is desired. Now the US has spent billions on bioweapons. Well, where do you think that money went? What is it doing? When you're giving money to people, they publish, and it's open source, they publish articles about it. So if you just type in Zheng Lishi and you read her scientific papers, which I've done, she says how she did it. She says which amino acids that she changed. So we have not prepared at all as if this is a bioweapon. And you may think, oh, well, okay, there's really no difference. So what's the difference? Well, the difference is that if there's a bioweapon attack, then you can have attacks with other kinds of things that are happening. Like once Pandora's box is open, and Pandora's box is now open, you could have other things. So I would not be surprised if there's been a double dosing or triple dosing on Manhattan and New York City. Your numbers are so much worse in New York than ours in LA. And LA has over 100,000 homeless people. 50,000 homeless people are just in one area of LA. Why do we not have these horrible numbers? I think it's because we didn't get a double dose or a triple dose. And as I said in the last panel, there's been a market shock, a demand shock, a supply shock. And what's happening now is that we have farm workers unable to plant the harvest and do their thing. And meat workers are getting sick. And so meat plants are closing down. And I have money, so I can get groceries from a lot of places. And trying to get a full bag of groceries of what I want, all these meal service, like I love Methodology. Methodology was saying, delay, we're sold out. And then they said, well, we're closing for this week. The big problem is that people are not learning from history. So if we look at why did we have this whole influenza death, 50 million to 100 million people between 1918, 1920, 22, what caused that? What caused that was food supply disruptions. So people were hungry, and fasting is good for a while, but there comes a point at which you don't have any benefit from fasting, and then it starts to deplete your ability to fight off infection. And so a lot of people died because they were hungry and they were malnourished, and we're going to start having problems all over the place with malnourishment. I'm sure that people are having shit diets when they're sitting at home. Bread is easy to eat. You're going to basically eat what's available and what's stored for a long time. So people are going to be eating a lot of pasta. They're going to be eating a lot of carbohydrates. This is bad because actually a ketogenic diet is better for dealing with COVID. People are not getting enough supplements. I've been trying to buy bulk supplements. I spent more than 20 grand on supplements, and probably I've gotten maybe 1,000 or 2,000 of those delivered. And these are things that I ordered more than a month ago. So
Well,
I
Alex,
think overall, yeah.
Alex, what I'm kind of curious too is, loss, and I think part of it is there's a degree of truth to what you're saying, and I can't comment on that publicly. But what I will say is that where we are right now, in New York, we've got mass graves that are being dug in Hart Island. You've got 14 days to claim your dead. Tiffany, you're in DC, right? Well, okay, so DC is supposed to be next, in terms of about 2 weeks of coming up with numbers like ours. And what we're going to be faced with is we need more of what the mayor of San Francisco has done in terms of guidelines, protocols, safety measures that are going to be implemented. Mayor de Blasio has done a horrible job in New York City.
I don't know why you're cutting me off to give a political commentary on what politicians have done. I'd like to share.
I'm not talking about what politicians, I'm talking just protocol, just the sheer protocols that actually need to be brought in actually should be effective, and there should be some best practices coming out of this.
Well, I don't know why people are looking to governments that have got it wrong.
Sorry.
So often.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Dr. Tiffany Gray here. Do you believe it's a biological weapon?
Hi. No, I do not. I am on the opposite side. I do not believe that is that. We've had viruses prior. This is they're scientific. Can you all hear me still?
No, you're
breaking up.
You're breaking up a little bit.
Can you still hear me? Hello. Can you hear me now?
See if you can get your connection back on.
Yeah.
A little bit better.
Okay. Can you all hear me?
I'll ask this question to Dr. Phil as well. Phil Watts I know he's on the phone, right?
Yeah, I'm on the phone. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep. Yeah, I hear you. I want to ask you if you also, Alex stated that, this might be a biological weapon. I'm wondering if you are in agreement with that.
Well, first I want to say I'm not a medical doctor, and I'm just going to run through some of the issues that have been mentioned before real quickly here. First of all, there are plenty of similar viruses in bats, and so there will be, some jump over from bats to humans at some point or another, whether this happens to be one of those cases or not. So I kind of think the question is moot.
But I just gave a reason why the question is not moot. You could get a double dose or a triple dose.
Alex, let him speak. Let him speak, and then you'll get the floor.
Yeah. I'm going to get to the New York situation in a second. It very much, what makes this virus so incredibly dangerous is, in fact, that it's a middle-of-the-road coronavirus. So it's sort of ordinariness and middleness is actually what makes it so dangerous. If it was more deadly, say, like Ebola or something, that actually makes it easier to contain. So this virus is particularly pernicious, whether it's by design or by happenstance. It very much looks like it's been traveling quietly in some parts of the U.S. starting in December, if not earlier. It just went unnoticed. The situation in New York is particularly interesting, I guess, because of the population density and the number of airports and so on and so forth. And so I'm not sure if one can tell the difference between double dose, triple dose, or just plain old population density effects for that. But I will say that what really troubles me most of all is, and I agree, by the way, Alex, with a whole bunch of points that nowadays between computer attacks, climate change, all kinds of different potential terrorist attacks and all kinds of things. We're living in a very sort of dangerous and uncertain time. So I kind of agree with sort of the bigger point that Alex is making, although I'm not sure I agree with the details. With respect to how long this is going to last, some places are going to be peaking in around 2 weeks or later. And so the inconsistency from state to state is a big problem. And I think the inconsistency amongst countries is a big problem. The lack of sort of a global agreed upon protocol and the lack of American leadership on this, if I can just call it that, is a bit of a problem or a big problem. And I would just finish by saying, with respect to what Oz said, the impact on industries is also very different. Like, I work in the renewable energy sector, and the impact is not very big at all. Whereas if you're in the services sector, the impact is huge, and you might have nothing to do. And so there's a huge disparity, not only in terms of what industries are affected and how they're affected, and so that's going to lead to all kinds of disruptions. Is sort of my quick summary.
So this is Dr. Gray again. Sorry, I was able to join by phone. Can you all hear me?
Well, I'm going to ask yeah, I hear you, and I'm going to ask the same question to you. Do you think this is a biological weapon?
So again, as I was, well, before I got cut off, I was saying that I do not agree that it is a biological weapon. As we know with previous viruses, as the previous speaker just mentioned, other coronaviruses jump from zoonotic disease, where it goes from animals to human. How this particular virus was transmitted, again, it will be a while before we're able to necessarily really be able to tell sort of the path of this virus and how it entered. And so again, when it comes to, as you also mentioned, when it comes to differences in LA versus New York, it all depends again on population density, again, the amount of individuals who travel from other places that were impacted initially into other states, which is again, while the cases will vary from place to place. Again, also it depends on when the first sort of case was identified. And as mentioned, and as I had mentioned earlier, some places, DC we are gearing up towards where we are supposed to be the next sort of hot spot. Again, just because of the time from when we had our first positive cases till now. And again, the issues of why you're going to see variation also depends on, as I was talking about earlier, health system capacity. This is this goes beyond just coronavirus. We have an existing public health infrastructure shortages and capacity, and this is something that we in public health have been advocating for and pushing for funding for a very long time. We've been pushing for the issues around health disparities, rural areas. I mean, even just the capacity to catch up to the data and have the adequate data that we necessarily need to really identify how far and why this is going. So it is something that, unfortunately, it's going to be a really long time before we actually recover. And again, once we even get back to some sort of normalcy or re-entering again, we are still not necessarily in the clear until we have an actual adequate treatment, which again is going to take some time.
Oz, do you have anything to add on to this? I know you wanted to say something.
I'm just, there's two things I'm thinking from this. One is that it's a protocol perspective, and we have to look at best practices across the United States. And I think San Francisco has some of the best practices. And if there's an opportunity for these types of things to be adopted by other mayors and to look at the failure of the de Blasio administration, just even in informing people, we've got challenges with how the bodies are being handled. We've got challenges with spread. We've got challenges with, the mayor was going to the gym after he put out a mandate telling people not to go to the gym. The mayor was going to McCarran Park after he was telling people not to go into the parks. So if you can't lead by example, what exactly are you doing? And we're a city of 17 million people with the highest population density of pretty much any place inside of the United States. If we can't actually have some baselines here, we're going to continue to have problems. We had 777 people die yesterday, okay? And right now, the backlog inside of the morgues is somewhere between 6 to 10 days, meaning that the crematoriums are completely full. They don't have enough body bags. They also don't have any place to bury them. Hart Island, which was where a bunch of plague hospitals were going back like 2 centuries, is where they're doing mass graves right now. And the question I really have to ask from a policy perspective is, they're saying, if after this you want to do something with that body, you can move they'll pay to exhume it and you can move the body. And I'm like, okay, so we're going to have juicy rotten corpses filled with corona being moved. I mean, the safety hazards of just poor policy are absolutely ridiculous right now. And then to add to that, think about the utility of blockchain inside of all of these systems, okay? Think about the fact that all of this stuff is a bunch of paper toe tags and paper lists. And now what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to go and find tens of thousands of bodies if they want to exhume someone. Do you actually know that they're in this mass grave or that mass grave? Okay, so these are things we should be thinking about. In addition to which, the supply chain is going to become an absolute disaster. The states are purchasing in a manner and fashion much like it was 2 years ago with bids. And the way the product is going right now is it's 100% cash and carry, or it's 50-50, 50% down, 50% when it hits the United States. We're working with a couple of supply chain companies for PPE. But the challenges that you have is that if the states want to buy on a purchase order and this and that, they're not getting the guarantees, which now the federal government is stepping in to actually guarantee. We have challenges. And then the last piece of this too, where blockchain could be very useful, everyone who's selling inside of this ecosystem has to sign an ethics agreement, which basically says that you're not going to charge more than 20% margin per tier on this stuff. Your 3M 1860 surgical masks are currently going for between $4.25 and $8 per mask. Okay, and that's at people buying them from 100,000 to 1 million units. These things are going to continue to get more expensive. The needs are, under the Defense Act, we need to be activating production, and that's starting. But the coordination of the supply chain, the need to bring in blockchain technology, and the absolute need for us to have the states working better with the federal government and industry are all things we need to solve in the next 90 days.
Alex, you believe blockchain can be the solution to what Oz just said?
Sure. I think that we should have decentralized systems, because there's one problem with the fact that we have the Geneva Protocol. The Geneva Protocol bans all research, all stockpiling of biological weapons. And anyone who's not against biological weapons, which are the nice name, the nice sciencey sounding wrapper is dual use gain of function. And people who don't bother to go look up dual use gain of function are idiots, and they're causing this misinformation that it's not even possible, that somehow some bad is evolving. So why didn't it happen many times before? Coronaviruses have been around for 1.5 billion years. I'll leave that aside and just go now to saying there's a bigger problem than the coronavirus now, which is people who have these agendas are now seeking to use this as an excuse to implement agendas that they've been planning for years. And that all of these evil schemes, and it's easy to say why they're evil, because they'll kill more people, because there's too many people, according to some very rich, powerful people, is they're all centralized. And that's the disease, centralization and control and lack of rights. That's the biggest disease that will kill more people than anyone. And if you look at a country that's killed over 60 million of its own people, there's an article, I have it published on my page, how China's apps are working. If you read that, on the one hand, it's genius. It's amazing how much they're doing to lock down people and track every foot that they take and where they're going. But there are also people in China who have said, we want to make it so that if you're not the right person, you can't even move a meter forward. You can't do anything. You can't book tickets on trains. You can't book hotels. You can't get high-speed internet. And that system is now the model and the archetype for how we do it. So I just want to say that if there's anything that blockchain has given us as a gift, open source, you can use a blockchain explorer and look at every transaction, that we have to apply that to all of this software that's coming out. And we should have many, many, many platforms, and we shouldn't give people who are monopolists and who, if we were enforcing antitrust laws, would be at the Supreme Court. We, at one point, Bill
Hey
Gates
guys,
was
I'm
on
so
trial
sorry.
at the
We have to actually wrap this up. We're already 30 minutes behind, so we have to move on to the next one. But this has been an incredible conversation.
May I say something before we wrap up? May I have a chance to speak in this panel?
Phil, go ahead. I mean, can we let Phil talk?
Yep. Maybe one last comment, and then we'll move on. We'll shorten the next one here a little bit.
This is Allan here. This is Allan Stevo. Now,
okay.
Corona here. I'm hearing just so much contempt for the free market here and what's being said. There's 20% maximum margin that will only lead to shortages. That'll only lead to more human misery. And then to pretend that using the blockchain to further control in this way is useful. This is totally insane, this kind of talk. And Dr. Gray is talking about capacity issues and PPE. This is standard for socialist approaches to medicine. And the American healthcare system very typically is so socialist that it can't handle these shocks, which makes perfect sense. And Dr. Gray's statement about there being shortages and about there being funding issues and that it'll all be over when there's adequate treatment, it won't be over because the next thing will come along and our socialist healthcare system will not be able to handle it then either. And this is Corona is not the problem here. The Corona response is the problem. There's 100 million Americans on lockdown right now. Churches are closed down in the United States. The USSR never closed down churches. This is crazy what's happening. And here I'm hearing about like these total socialist ideas being thrown around as if there's some kind of solution to this problem, which they aren't. And that's why Bitcoin is great. Because Bitcoin puts a little bit of control in the hands of the individual instead of these central planners, some of whom seem to be on this phone call, who would like to come up with any little inch that they can use to squeeze into the individual's life and to control the individual.
I love Bitcoin as the next person, but I don't. Bitcoin is not completely decentralized, so we can all agree on that. We should end it on that note.
There you go. Drop the mic. Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it. I know some of you guys are still joining us on other panels, including David. I think 2 panels from now, you're joining us again. So thank you again. And now we'll move on to the next. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.